The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
I'm Yalda Hakim, live in Jerusalem on The Wrap tonight. In a dramatic escalation, a US submarine sinks an Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka, the first such attack ordered by the White House since World War II.
They are toast, and they know it. Or at least, soon enough, they will know it.
With the war in its fifth day, Iran says that Israeli and American airstrikes have killed more than 1,000 people.
We're going to go behind here. You can hear the boom.
But Iran and its allies are still hitting back. Sirens sound across northern Israel. And how the war threatens the global economy, Iran wreaks havoc on the world's oil and gas supplies.
Well, coming up, we'll be discussing all of this and more with Salma Shah and James Lyons, plus a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers and how they are reporting the conflict.
Good evening from Jerusalem. I'm Yalda Hakim. For the first time since the Second World War, an American submarine has sunk an enemy ship with a torpedo. At least 80 people were killed when the Iris Dina was attacked off the coast of Sri Lanka. And this evening, Iran's news agency is reporting a new wave of missile strikes by the United States and Israel. But the theatre of war is getting ever wider. NATO shot down an Iranian missile heading towards Turkey today. Our US correspondent David Blevins reports.
The periscope view of a US strike on an Iranian ship. And the Pentagon's view of the enemy.
They are toast, and they know it.
It was an audacious attack, claiming dozens of lives in the Indian Ocean, international waters, where they may have felt safe.
Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
And this is what war looks like now. The US using long-range precision strike missiles in combat for the first time. Wiping out the regime, says the president.
Everybody that seems to want to be a leader, they end up dead.
The commander-in-chief in bullish mood on day 5.
We're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
Israel has continued its bombardment of the Iranian capital. Broad-scale strikes, they said, on the regime's command centres in Tehran.
I'm sorry to see we're in such a situation. God willing, this ends soon. To the betterment of Iran, and the criminal America is gone.
Mohammed Mehrabi's apartment has been destroyed.
We were at home when this happened. My wife was hit by the blast wave and we took her to the hospital. I was hit by broken glass. A lot of it hit my head.
There have been more strikes on Lebanon too, Israel targeting Hezbollah sites in Beirut, an evacuation order issued for 16 towns and villages. And the joint combat mission, thousands of miles away, continues to have repercussions for President Trump here at home, with members of Congress still seeking clarity on the justification for it and the objectives. But this is a very different administration, so this is a very different war, with the Pentagon now openly boasting that it has abandoned the normal rules of engagement.
This was never meant to be a fair fight, and it is not a fair fight. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be.
But is this how it should be? Sri Lanka recovering the bodies of Iranian sailors, their ships sunk by the United States, a nation that has yet to declare itself at war. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Well, let's bring in our James Matthews, who joins me live from Washington. And James, listening to some of these press conferences over the last few days, whether it's the Secretary of War, the President, the Secretary of State, the language being used, punching them, their toast, there is a massive level of bravado there. And yet the objectives keep shifting and changing at a head-spinning rate.
That's right, yeah, we're on day 5 now, Yalda, and we have heard mixed messages throughout. I think Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, tried to pin down the set of objectives today, dismissing any notion that there had been inconsistency, which there absolutely has. She laid out 4 key aims to destroy Iran's navy, destroy their ballistic missile capacity, ensure that their proxies in the region can no longer harm Americans, and to ensure they can never obtain a nuclear weapon. Conspicuous by its absence on that list for me, Yalda, was regime change. Remember Donald Trump weeks ago saying help is on the way to protesters in the streets? Well, she said that she spoke about a hope that freedom rests in their hands, talking about the Iranian people, but she didn't give any hint as to what the mechanism whereby they might achieve that freedom would be. So that seems to have been shelved for now. She spoke about a quick and effective, a focus on a quick and effective result, said that victory would mean the achievement of these 4 objectives. So it was very American-centric, the whole business of objectives being laid out and the thrust of Caroline Levitt today. And meanwhile, of course, as you say, the bravado and the hyperbole continues. I think the Americans very much trying to embroider the context by which they can portray this and declare this a success.
James, as always, thank you so much. Well, Israel came under attack again today from Iranian missiles and drones. Diana Magnay was close to the border with Lebanon. Just have a look.
We're now right at the border. We're going to go behind here. You can hear the boom. I'll just keep cover down because the border is literally a couple of kilometres. There's been a lot of fighting here over the last 24, 48 hours. It all started Sunday into Monday. Hezbollah sending just 6 rockets over, and Israel deciding to take the opportunity to really go for it and hit hard. From what we understand from the IDF, Iran and Hezbollah are both coordinating their strikes at the moment. So if you get the siren, that means it's coming from Iran. If it's just a loud blast, that means you have to take cover pretty quickly because it's coming from Hezbollah just across the border over there in Lebanon. That grey concrete line is the technical demarcation line. Beyond that is the blue line, behind which Israel had to withdraw back in the day. And you can see the destroyed villages in southern Lebanon. They've been destroyed for a long time now. But what Israel has now said that people have to do is withdraw north of the Litani River. That is a huge area. That's 10% basically of the whole of Lebanon because of the fight with Hezbollah.
We have time. If this is from Iran, so let's proceed. יש חטא איפה שהמחסום, תן גז.
I love it. If this is from Iran, let's proceed.
It's the instruction.
How long do we have? A minute and a half?
Yes, we have 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Okay, but
we haven't had many alerts over the past 48 hours, but certainly up here in the border area, you're getting a lot more. So it's quite nice to have shelters all over the place. Although, I've got to say, it's quite a convivial atmosphere in these shelters. It's also full of IDF soldiers who we can't show you, who are pretty used to this.
That's Diana Magnay with that report. Well, Iran is also wreaking havoc on the global economy, effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz to oil tankers, one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Sky Sally Lockwood is in the UAE and has seen how tankers are queuing up.
There was a big explosion just behind us. It's not clear what's been hit, whether it was an oil facility or a tanker, but certainly a big fire has broken out and it's lit up the evening sky here in bright orange, big flames, a huge cloud of smoke, but no official word yet as to exactly what's happened. But if we're to go by recent days, then it's probably some sort of projectile that has hit either a tanker or an oil facility, because there have been a number of incidents like that. Even just this morning, there was a container ship trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz here, coming in this direction, which was hit by a projectile, probably a drone. A fire broke out. The crew were rescued safely. There was no environmental damage. And there was a similar incident here in Fujairah last night. And to give you an idea why this is so significant, this strait here is a very narrow waterway. It's 21 miles wide at the most narrow point, with Oman and the UAE to the south and Iran to the north. And around a fifth of the world's oil flows through this strait out into the Gulf of Oman and reaches the world's energy supply. And at the moment, it's effectively closed, not officially, but the Revolutionary Guard has said that any ship trying to pass through will be targeted and attacked. And as we're seeing, that is happening. And it's brought commercial shipping to an absolute standstill here. Just off the coast where we are, earlier we could see dozens of tankers at standstill, along with naval vessels.
Sally Lockwood there. Well, let's speak now to our correspondent Cordelia Lynch, who joins me from just outside Tel Aviv in Ramla. And Cordy, there is so much happening at such a fast pace. In the last few minutes, the Reuters news agency is quoting a state television in Iran as saying that the Iranian regime says it will target Israeli nuclear site of Dimona if they try and seek a regime change. You know, it just gives you a sense of how quickly this is now escalating, and there doesn't feel like there are any red lines anymore.
Absolutely. No red lines, no apparent off-ramps being discussed or presented. And that threat from Iran about Dimona is perhaps the most direct threat we've had from Iran about Israeli infrastructure and what it will do if Israel decides to pursue regime change. I think 5 days in, Yalda, what we are seeing now are really the shifting sands of timescale, a conflict broadening, spiraling, enveloping most of the Middle East. And we are only, as I say, 5 days in now. I think we are looking at what Israel and what America intends to do here, and it's not clear with either. I think there is a chance there will be diplomatic rifts between the two as we go on. We know that Donald Trump has touted this idea that this war could be over in 4 weeks, but Israel has also said it is willing to go further, to go longer. And this is about a much broader range of goals for Israel. We've already seen it talking, Benjamin Netanyahu talking about Hezbollah, crushing that, moving troops into the south of the country. Tonight, there are reports that Kurdish troops are entering Iran. That raises the spectre of a possible civil war inside Iran. So you've got these multiple fronts occurring. Now, the question is, what are the capabilities, the capacities of each of these forces? We know that both America and Israel want to bring an end to Iran's nuclear ability, its infrastructure, to make sure that they try and extinguish ultimately the threat. We don't really know what Iran has. There have been some US officials suggesting that there's been a reduction in the number of strikes from Iran recently, but they may well be laying the ground for a greater offensive in the days to come. So a lot of uncertainty for the region and a rising death toll. Human rights groups estimating at least 1,000 people have died inside Iran alone. So I think the only thing we can be certain of right now is a kind of sustained jeopardy and a lot of mercurial moments still to come. Donald Trump not really playing his cards. Benjamin Netanyahu has a much kind of broader set of goals for the entire region, trying to reshape his influence, and he is not willing to stop anytime soon.
Cordy, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there and all of your analysis. So big questions about the objectives here, the strategy and what the actual end game is, with lots of statements being made by the White House that this could go on for 4 weeks. Cordelia saying her Israeli contacts are telling her this could extend for 8 weeks. So we'll be continuing to monitor all the developments here from the ground. But for now, Anna, back to you in the studio.
Yes, very interesting. Yalda, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's bring in our guests for this evening, Starmer Shah and James Lyons. Welcome to both of you. And certainly torpedoing an Iranian warship in international waters, you know, this quiet death, as Pete Hegseth put it, really does underscore how the reach of this conflict is spreading and the unabashed determination, really, of America.
Without question, and I think, you know, as we've just heard, Trump's 4 weeks of this war feels that it's going to be optimistic as a timeline, and there's going to be uncertainty that continues for a much longer time and way beyond that.
James?
Yeah, well, it's not just the warship that's been taken out in the Indian Ocean today. We've seen missiles falling in Turkey and Syria, an escalation in Lebanon. It all seems to be very much spiralling.
OK, well, the number of people known to have been killed in the war has now passed 1,100. Almost all of those deaths, 1,045, are in Iran, a number tallied by the Red Crescent Society since Saturday. Well, officials in Lebanon say Israeli strikes have killed 72 people. In Israel, 11 people have been killed by Iran's retaliatory action. 4 have died in Kuwait, 3 in the UAE, 1 each in Bahrain and Oman, and 6 US personnel have been killed in the military operations. Well, depending on your perspective, Keir Starmer is either having a Zelensky moment with Donald Trump or he's reenacting that famous scene from Love Actually. This is what he said in the House of Commons today.
American planes are operating out of British bases. That is the special relationship in action. British jets are shooting down drones and missiles to protect American lives in the Middle East on our joint bases. That is the special relationship in action. Sharing intelligence every day to keep our people safe. That is the special relationship in action. Hanging on to President Trump's latest words is not the special relationship.
The fact of the matter is that the war in Iran is happening now. But the OBR say the government won't hit 3% on defence for 5 years. The war is happening now. There is no urgency from the Prime Minister. Why is he leaving the job of funding our armed forces to the next government?
PMQs earlier. Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, has joined us. But, James, let's go to you first of all. I mean, it was on Monday, that dressing down by Donald Trump, but people talked about it as his Zelensky moment. Now people are talking about it as, is it Love Actually, you know, Hugh Grant versus Billy Bob Thornton in the film? Well, actually, he's trying to put separation between what the Americans are doing and his response to this. Which do you think it is, or is it neither?
Well, I think the Prime Minister is just saying what he genuinely feels and believes. He's been deliberately trying to avoid having a kind of Love Actually moment up to this point. And, you know, frankly, I don't think anyone's going to mistake him for Hugh Grant in a hurry. But I think, you know, clearly there is just a difference here of policy opinion. And actually, I don't think the Prime Minister's going out of his way to pick a fight on this at all, if you look at what he's been saying, the way he's been saying it.
Yes, and from Kemi Badenoch there, 2 distinct criticisms. One, the is it too little, too late, of how the UK is protecting its own forces in the Gulf, and indeed, secondarily, how is it supporting an ally? And then the other big issue she talked about is the threadbare nature of our armed forces, which, to be fair, successive governments can take the blame for. But, I mean, is she landing points on that, do you think? Where do you stand on this?
I actually thought her performance, given, you know, how she's had an uptick in terms of her popularity at PMQs, was actually a little bit weaker today. She didn't quite land the blows that she needed to. The points that she made were a little bit convoluted. Notwithstanding, there are real concerns about our defence capability, notwithstanding the fact that there are real concerns about British citizens that are still out there in the Middle East and potentially suffering. I do think that they didn't land as well.
Yeah, but in terms, John, in terms of what Keir Starmer is doing, effectively he's saying, you know, no to bases when it's an offensive operation, and now that British areas are under attack, for example, Cyprus, then it becomes OK to be used defensively. So as far as he's quite concerned, is it quite a straightforward argument from him?
Well, he claims, Number 10 and the Prime Minister have been claiming since Sunday night, when he made what some described as a U-turn in a broadcast, that the Americans had asked a different question from the initial one, which was help for offensive bombing. Going back to your point, I mean, Kemi Badenoch started off on defence spending, then she went on to energy policy, welfare, and then she ended up talking about the Gorton and Denton by-election.
Yeah, but what about Sir Keir Starmer? I mean, how she did with PMQs is sort of slightly by the by, isn't it? It's like, specifically, will his argument hold up, do you think? And is it getting the support of his own his own Labour Party?
Most of them, apart from the left-wingers, who, of course, some of them are supporting Jeremy Corbyn's move, putting forward a bill to make sure that any move is legal, and that probably won't even be debated. I was going to say I thought his best moments in PMQs was not against Kemi Badenoch, but as on Monday, when his best moment was answering Sir Edward Lee. Today is when he answered Gareth Bacon, a Tory MP, who talked about him dithering and equivocal response, as that made the relationship stronger or weaker. And then he talks about the special relationship in action, American planes operating out of British bases, British jets shooting down drones and missiles, and then sharing intelligence, all examples of the special relationship. And then there was a nice little put-down for the president. Hanging on to President Trump's latest words is not the special relationship in action, a reference perhaps that he's changed his mind on Chagos several times. And as for your point about Hugh Grant, I mean, a few years back, Sir Keir was, of course, compared to the Mark Darcy character played by Colin Firth in the Bridget Jones
I think it's been comprehensively debunked that he was the model for that particular character.
You wanted to come in?
Yeah, I wanted to be clear on one point. Do we know whether Kemi Badenoch was briefed on the operations under Privy Council terms? Because the one thing that I find interesting about Keir Starmer's performance at PMQs today was that he was very specific about how we had assisted the US, and I think that actually does help him hold his argument. In terms of the line that he's treading at the moment with the US, is that there has been assistance, and all the opposition leaders Privy Council members, should have access to that information before they go into Prime Minister's questions.
The answer to your question is yes, because when he made his long statement on Monday, when she responded, she said, thanks for the statement, and thank you also for the briefing I've had.
But I think that, you know, some of the problems or the accusations being levelled about U-turns here could have been avoided if the Prime Minister had been more upfront about the fact that the bases could be used later on.
Yeah.
I
could have told that to Donald Trump and he wouldn't have had to suffer Monday. He could have said, while you are on your first strikes, the answer's no, but come back to me as soon as we are protecting UK forces and others in the region.
Well, the reports out of the US suggest that, like, the refusal over the initial offer is caused all sorts of problems and probably caused us a lot more problems down the road. But I think when he'd done that message to the country over the weekend, he said that, you know, we keep this under review and things change and all the rest of it. You know, when events are moving, international events like this are moving so fast, I think it's always wise to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room.
Okay. But I was just going to say the critical point here is that we are very much on the outside of the tent, so we are scrambling to come up with an answer because that special relationship that the Prime Minister talked about does not exist.
But with the way we've behaved, we've put ourselves in the field well past the tent, haven't we? That's the problem, probably.
Very so.
So The Guardian is leading on that attack from the US on the Iranian ship off the coast of Sri Lanka. In fact, many of the newspapers are, and The Guardian pointing out that at least 87 are dead. I think 32 pulled from the waters alive. Well, there are growing fears, of course, about the impact of the war on the world economy. Here in the UK, the energy price cap could rise by as much as £160 each year because of the conflict. Let us show you why. Well, this is what has happened to traffic in one of the world's busiest shipping routes, the Strait of Hormuz. It has effectively been closed, largely because of insurance issues. Well, here is the impact on costs. They are up a lot, as you can see. And that has led forecasters to predict a rise in household energy bills by 10% from July. Similar pressures will be felt right across industry. Well, certainly our correspondent, Sally Lockwood, went up to the northern reaches of the UAE and saw all the ships lined up in the murk, you know, waiting to travel through the Strait of Hormuz. This is very difficult, you know, for the UK and for the global economy.
Absolutely. I mean, we only heard the Chancellor yesterday talking about how the government was taking action on cost of living, and clearly this conflict threatens to drive an absolute coach and horses through that agenda.
I also think that there is very little that the UK can do independently. I mean, if we are going to be in the tent, because we know that these things are coming down the track, there is still very little that we can do to influence the situation and stabilise this. So, unfortunately, this is going to be our reality for some time to come.
Yes, and I was just reading, actually, that there's been an assessment of the production of LNG, liquefied natural gas from America and Australia. Suggestion is they're at full capacity and can do little to step in to replace Qatar, which has stopped its production because it can't ship it out. Qatar providing 20% of the world's resource course, on LNG. So, you know, that's the tricky part here, isn't it?
The other fear, of course, is price of petrol going up at the pumps. And there have been allegations today of profiteering by the petrol companies, despite the fact they had a meeting with the Chancellor this afternoon. The accusation is that they've put their prices up while they're still selling the old petrol. And just on the Straits of Hormuz and, you know, shipping lanes being disabled, if you like, there's a bit of a parallel with Suez here, because that was all about the Suez Canal, except on that occasion, of course, it was the British and the French who were taking action which the Americans were opposed to, and there was a huge clash between Anthony Eden and Eisenhower.
We're back to 1956.
Well, we don't remember it as well as you,
Well,
John.
I don't remember it either. It's history. I've written a piece about it on our website.
My dad was on the last boat out of the Suez Canal before it shut, actually. Wow. So anyway, that's why I remember it was 1956. There we go. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme. Thanks to all of you so far. Next up, though, we will be taking a first look at what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
Well, it's time now to see what is making the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers. The Financial Times leads on the escalating war with Iran after a US submarine torpedoed an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean near Sri Lanka. And The Guardian reporting at least 87 people have died in the attack on the vessel. You can see many of the newspapers, indeed, with those moving pictures shot from a periscope, because this is the first time that a US has sunk a vessel by torpedo since the Second World War. Well, let's start to discuss some of them, and we're going to kick off with the Times, in fact. Allies round on weak UK. You know, this is difficult stuff to read, isn't it, for the Prime Minister? What exactly are they talking about here?
Well, there's criticism that's now coming in of the UK from other places other than Washington. So first we have the Cypriot Commissioner, who has been critical, saying that he expected more, basically, from the UK government to provide a bit more of a robust defence on British basis, and you can understand that, perhaps, from his position. But there's a really interesting second part here, which is the Times has been told that Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates have concerns about the UK's response to the Middle East conflict. Now, not only is this difficult for us to be able to have to take that criticism from other nations, but clearly there are strategic positions that we are trying to defend in the Middle East. We need to be able to have recourse to other allies, to other nations, to support our position and to be able to continue that dialogue. So there is some contagion and contamination in the region with the UK's response. So I think that is actually a very concerning point.
And the point being, of course, we have our own military. Bahrain is a very important ally in that regard for us and the Americans. You know, will this cause pause for thought in Downing Street? Do you think about the strategy so far? And indeed that initial response to it, not about joining the war, but about the use of our bases, even if he explicitly said for defensive purposes only?
So I think at the moment people are feeling in Number 10 fairly secure in the position that they've taken, but clearly this kind of
because they
detail
think we're
coming
on the right
out
side of international law.
Exactly.
Is that the only basis for it?
Well, I think they need to be making more of a kind of values-based argument around this, and why the Prime Minister has opposed being more kind of active in this. And they will say that obviously British forces are involved in defensive operations right now, but to read this sort of stuff from allies, if it's true, is clearly, and I'm sure it's because it's Times, is very, very difficult. And there's another detail in here, actually, which says that the proposal to send a ship to the area didn't cross the desk of the Chief of the Defence Staff until 9:30 on Tuesday morning, which seems fairly remarkable given the way the events were already unfolding there. And frankly, you know, there's been some reporting today that there were meetings going on in the MOD and in Whitehall last week that predicted that this conflict would spread in exactly the way that it has. And you would have thought that even on a precautionary principle, you would have been getting ready to do this kind of deployment rather than waiting for the committee for the bolting of stable doors after the horse is gone to meet.
Yes, and I suppose the only benefit for the Prime Minister is that Emmanuel Macron is singing from the same hymn sheet, pretty much, in terms of it being outside international law. And so is Spain. At one point, Caroline Levitt said today that Spain has now agreed for the use of its bases and is cooperating, which prompted Spain's Foreign Minister to get on a radio station and denied they were helping America and cooperating at all by giving access to bases, saying that was still a flat no from them. So that's quite interesting in terms of Europe. In the meantime, many of the newspapers, of course, leading on the ship that went down off Sri Lanka. It is said it was at an event, a naval event, at the invitation of India and was returning, that it was seen as an exhibition vessel because it was one of the newest. And the torpedo, as you can see, exploded under the stern of this vessel and then, therefore, caused it to lift up in the air and then break up. And once it starts to break up, it sank. I wonder if we can lose this strap slightly, actually. It sank before Sri Lankan authorities could even get there. So this is extraordinary footage, and it shows the scope of this war for the Americans.
Yeah, and I believe this is the first time that a US submarine has sunk a ship since 1945. So it's a remarkable scenes, and as you say, like a sign of how far the US are prepared to go. And it's been very notable today, the kind of the difference in the kind of rhetoric between the US and Europe. I mean, Pete Hegseth was out earlier today saying they're toast and they know it.
Well, let's listen to Pete Hegseth, shall we? Quite an extraordinary performance from him bluntly today, saying that Iran is toast. Here he is.
Our warfighters have maximum authorities granted personally by the president and yours truly. Our rules of engagement are bold, precise, and designed to unleash American power, not shackle it. This was never meant to be a fair fight, and it is not a fair fight. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be.
Well, little doubt that the US can command overwhelming firepower. Questions have been asked about President Trump's war aims. What does victory look like? Here's one answer from them.
The hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now. We have objectives.
We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world. We will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon.
We will do this as long as it takes to achieve those objectives, and we will achieve those objectives. The world will be a safer place when we're done with this operation.
James, you've worked in Whitehall. Can you imagine us producing one of those?
Not quite.
No, exactly. What did you make of it?
I think it's absolutely incredible. And this is social media used by politicians at its absolute sort of premium output, in that they are unabashed, they are unapologetic. The language that you're hearing is not what we're used to hearing from leaders. It's not something that either you or I would sanction if our principals were out there putting this out. But clearly, it's serving a purpose. And who is that designed for? Which is the audience that is going to consume it? Perhaps it's the American electorate. Perhaps it's actually the MAGA supporters who are inherently quite critical of international action, and they're talking about America's strength in this. So I find that whole output incredibly fascinating, but it is compelling viewing, and it's something that actually Europeans generally do not engage with, but the Americans are leading the way.
I remember after Trump came in at the start of his second term, having a discussion with colleagues in Number 10 who are like, well, why do we have to bother with the TV and newspapers and the political reporters in the lobby and the rest of it? Why can't we just communicate through social media like Donald Trump does? And I said, well, the thing is, you need the content, and if the Prime Minister wants to threaten to invade Greenland, then I'm sure we can get some coverage that way.
Exactly, especially if he puts a bit of heavy metal on it. Then it might get picked up, certainly. In the meantime, there's been a poll by the US broadcaster NBC. Donald Trump's decision to launch a war in the Middle East is not popular with most Americans. 54% of voters disapprove of Trump's handling of Iran, compared to 41% who approve, and another 5% say they either don't have an opinion or are not sure. A similar share, 52%, said the US should not have taken the military action, while 41% say it should have, and 7% say they aren't sure. In the meantime, going back to domestic policy, the Daily Telegraph is suggesting that it is Miliband who led the cabinet pushback against letting the US use British bases. So, who is it in cabinet who has got strong views on this, do you think?
Well, actually, it says that it was Ed Miliband, Rachel Reeves and Yvette Cooper, but Ed Miliband is obviously something of a bogeyman for the Telegraph, so they've picked him out. But I think they've also picked him out for another very good reason, which you see further down the story, which is he led the opposition in this country to the proposed airstrikes on Syria, and when the UK Parliament voted against that, the US had second thoughts. I heard a story at the time that he bounded into the Labour whip's office and declared, hey guys, we've stopped a war, which of course he hadn't. It just stopped us getting involved. And for lots of people, that was the moment that lots of enemies of the West around the world were emboldened. So I can see why they picked out Ed Miliband there, but it does seem to be fairly widespread support. And I certainly, I can't imagine for a moment that Keir Starmer needed persuading.
Let's just work out, though, how did this story emerge as a veteran of the Tory psychodrama and various leaks coming out of Cabinet into the newspapers? What is this for? Is it because the Prime Minister needs to show that he has Cabinet support? Or is it that his position has further destabilised, and people are trying to position themselves to take advantage of the left of the Labour Party, because there is no real reason why anybody needs to brief that Ed Miliband, Rachel Reeves and Yvette Cooper are backing the Prime Minister on this position. Is it to actually inflate their own positions for a potential leadership contest that might be coming down the track?
Yeah, and to be fair, the copy doesn't suggest that they were necessarily supporting the Prime Minister's position. It does suggest that Ed Miliband was leading the charge here.
Yeah, indeed so. Well, I mentioned the White House Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt, saying earlier that Spain has now agreed to cooperate with US operations in the Middle East after Donald Trump had threatened to cut off trade with Madrid, that moment on Monday that we talked about earlier, where he also suggested that the British Prime Minister was no Winston Churchill. But the Spanish Prime Minister had news for her.
The position of the Spanish government can be summed up in 4 words. No to the war. The world, Europe and Spain have been there before. 23 years ago, another US administration dragged us into a war in the Middle East.
I hope so.
Yeah, so Spain's standing firm as well. But, you know, what I don't know is if they have the same, you know, level of military hardware themselves in the region, because quite clearly we do, and already 2 bases, you know, containing British military hardware have been attacked.
I think it's interesting that the Prime Minister is leaning so heavily on this sort of European contingent to kind of form what Carney had talked about previously at Davos, you know, the middle countries stating their claim and staking their ground. It's difficult to hold that line when there is so much power and force coming out of the US and seeing who's actually going to stay there and who's going to peel off. Because, as you say, the UK is the one that owns the assets that are critical here, and the UK is going to be the ones that suffer the consequences of this. So one of the things that is going to be difficult for the Prime Minister is not articulating that strategy and really thinking about where he wants to go at the end of this process.
And, of course, Spain have the protection of being in the EU, so the US will find it very, very difficult to single them out. But obviously, because of Brexit, we don't have that.
Yes, Friedrich Merz, German Chancellor, who was alongside Donald Trump, made exactly that point, in fact. MPs, though, have been dancing, Strictly style. In fact, is it appropriate, do you reckon? It's in the on the front of the FT, somewhere on there.
Front of the Telegraph.
It's on front of the Telegraph as well. Yes, indeed so. Front of the Telegraph, yes, with Angela Rippon. Is it appropriate, do you think, to be doing this? Is this, you know, as the world burns, MPs keep dancing?
And I'm afraid I find this really appalling. And I don't begrudge MPs, you know, in the way that they want to have their working life. I think that there has to be some respite at some point. But I actually think it's a really undignified scene, and it could have been cancelled at any point, given what was happening today, given what's been happening this week, and given what we are asking our parliamentarians to have to consider going forward. And I note there, I think I'm right in saying that that is the new MP for Gorton and Denton in this
is the
picture.
Telegraph, if we can get the front page of the Telegraph.
And, you know, I admire the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, greatly as a person and as a Speaker, but I think this is a bit of a misjudgment to allow this sort of event to go on, because what will people at home be thinking about what their parliamentarians are doing?
Yes, they say
I would just like to, I slightly disagree with Starmer, just in terms of, I don't think it's got anything to do with the international situation. I just don't think this is acceptable.
It's not what?
Acceptable.
Why
are they doing this in the middle of the working day?
It's to promote health, well-being, and the paper says and Angela Rippon, but there we are. So, you know, that is all good, isn't it, to promote health and well-being?
Do you think people are going to be taking up dancing tomorrow as a result of this?
But it's not the point. The job of parliamentarians is to promote health and well-being through the legislation that they scrutinise. And I think that there is such a seriousness occurring in the world today. And you're right, it's not just about international affairs, but it's the expectation of people for the public servants that they send to represent them. And I am actually very shocked at this.
I think, you know, people out there who are finding it hard, you know, working hard, finding it hard to, you know, make ends meet, facing all the pressures of modern-day life, will just think this is from a different planet.
I'm just mesmerised by the dancing right now, but there we are. Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme, looking at more of the newspapers as well, and the spying allegations today. Back in a moment.
a lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbors, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbors that harbor decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more. Well, let's kick off and make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs? He's coming out! What more do you need?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Rich and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Now, police have arrested 3 men suspected of spying for China in violation of the UK's National Security Act. It's been revealed that one of the men is David Taylor, the husband of sitting Labour MP Joni Reid. Well, let's see how the newspapers are covering that story then. And the Daily Mirror reports that MP Joni Reid claims to have never suspected her husband of spying. It is also the lead story for the front of The Star with the headline, "The Spy Who Loved MP." Clearly, spy is in inverted commas there because this is an active case, clearly. So let us just tell you Joni Reid's statement then. I have never been to China. I have never spoken on China or China-related matters in the Commons. I have never asked a question on China-related matters. As far as I'm aware, I've never met any Chinese businesses whilst I've been an MP, any Chinese diplomats or government employees, nor raised any concern with ministers or anyone else on behalf of, even coincidentally, Chinese interests. I am a social democrat who believes in freedom of expression, free trade unions and free elections. I'm not any sort of admirer or apologist for the Chinese Communist Party's dictatorship. Well, John Craig is here with me now, but this is very difficult for a sitting MP, James, is it not, to have these allegations in your family?
It would seem a little bit awkward, yes.
I mean, it's not just that. It's that the implication, given everything that's happening, given what we're trying to do or what the government's seeking to do with China in terms of trade, and obviously the situation with the US, with China being this existential threat to the world order, I think this is obviously going to have ripples and impact for the way that we think about lobbying and the way that China or other potential hostile states are trying to influence our politics and our parliament.
John?
Looking at that statement, I mean, she's clearly been taken completely by surprise by this. I know Joni Reid. She's the granddaughter of the famous Jimmy Reid, who led the strikes and the sit-in at Upper Clyde Shipbuilders all those years ago, famous trade unionist. She's MP for East Kilbride in Scotland. She made her name, I think, on Lewisham Council. And I think she's one of the... You could probably... I mean, I know we talk about a lot of people being rising stars, but she's one of the more able MPs since she was elected in 2024. This will have come as a shock, I guess, to her and to those who... other MPs who know her pretty well. It is... what happened was today that, first of all, the Met made an announcement about these arrests, and then there was a statement from Dan Jarvis, the Security Minister in the Commons, and then we got this statement from Joni Reid basically saying, I know nothing about this. And I must admit, I don't recall her ever raising China in the House of Commons either. I could name you the MPs who go on about China, either for or against it, but she's not one of them.
I mean, I think there's a point here, which is, whatever's happened in this case, and we've had various allegations flying around similar to this in the past, etc. What the government are trying to do is, after years of our policy towards China veering around under the last government, trying to have a consistent grown-up engagement where we can try to reap the economic benefits while being very mindful of the reality of dealing with them. And that, unfortunately, attracts lots of criticism from some of the opposition figures who we all know very well who don't want to have that kind of grown-up and realistic assessment of the relationship.
I think that is an understatement in the complexity of what we are dealing with when it comes to China in this multipolar world. And I would remind you that under the Cameron years, actually, they followed a very similar path in having a structured strategic engagement with China. But the reality is that there are question marks about some of the behaviours that we have seen, and we are looking at arrests of potential influence here. And I make no comment about the veracity, they need to be fully investigated, but I don't think it's as simple as that.
I mean, yes, I think just to come back to the point around what's happening in Iran as well, we're reading analysts today saying that one of the effects of the military action is going to be to drive China closer to Russia as cheap energy from Iran is shut off.
Yes, indeed, you're right, because Russia is the best customer for Iran in terms of its oil exports, isn't it? John, you've come for a different story, in fact, which is the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who will be giving a major speech on immigration tomorrow. She will announce that only asylum seekers with legitimate claims who follow the rules will get taxpayer-funded support under new rules that will come into force in June. We've got a special programme tomorrow evening, in fact, about this, and with Shabana Mahmood. Anyway, what are the details and how materially different is it to what was either announced by the Tories or what we have now?
Well, this is Shabana Mahmood trying to show that she's Labour's toughest Home Secretary since, say, David Blunkett. There's two elements to this. Yes, the details of what she's announcing. For example, there's another proposal. You've mentioned they're going to... asylum seekers who break the law or work illegally will be kicked out of government-funded accommodation and lose their support payments. There's also a change in the time that they can reapply. Under the plans, people granted asylum will have to have refugee status reviewed every 30 months. At the moment, it's 5 years. Now, these are the proposals. The Home Secretary went to Denmark last week and came back full of admiration for the way they operate. But there's also a very political element to this speech because she's going to take on the government's opponents, both She's not actually going to mention the Tories, I don't think, but she's going to talk about reform and the Greens. She will say that reform...
I'm going to stop you there only because there's kind of breaking news about us. It happens at this time of year. It is
Good
the RTS
news.
Awards. Well, it is, actually. It's quite a nice long list. Anyway, so would you mind if you indulge me, if you don't mind? First of all, Yusra El-Bahir won Network Television Journalist of the Year. That is our Africa correspondent. Yalda Hakim, who would have been at the event but is in Jerusalem, won Network Presenter of the Year. Molly Malone, Emerging Talent Digital Journalism. She's done lots about prisons, actually. Digital Journalism Award for Sky News, 24 Hours in the Kill Zone, and Sky News also won News Channel of the Year. And I can't remember how many times in a row that is. It's too many to count now, I think, probably, isn't it? Anyway, congratulations to us, specifically to Yalda as well, who is abroad right now covering the Iran war. Back with all the top stories in just a moment.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter. Hello and welcome, Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Roger and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Tonight on The Wrap, the war on Iran intensifies. In a dramatic escalation, a US submarine has sunk an Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka, the first time that's happened since World War II.
They are toast, and they know it. Or at least, soon enough, they will know it.
We're going to go behind here. You can hear the boom. But Iran and its allies are hitting back. Sirens sound across northern Israel. How the war threatens the global economy. Iran wreaks havoc on the world's oil and gas supplies. Well, coming up, we'll be discussing all of this and more with Starmer Shah and James Lyons. Welcome to both of you. Plus, a first look at the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers and how they are reporting the conflict. Hello, good evening to you. Good evening to James and to Salma. Well, for the first time since the Second World War, an American submarine has sunk an enemy ship with a torpedo. At least 87 people were killed when the Denner was attacked off the coast of Sri Lanka. Well, Salma and James, very dramatic footage from this, periscope footage we were shown.
Absolutely, and if anyone was any doubt about the US's determination to relentlessly and remorselessly prosecute this war, they can't be now.
Broadening and escalation again.
Broadening, escalating, and a doubling down, as we're going to see from the US administration. So the idea that this is going to be a short, sharp conflict, I think, is probably for the birds at this point.
Well, let's get the very latest then tonight from our US correspondent, David Blevins.
The periscope view of a US strike on an Iranian ship. And the Pentagon's view of the enemy.
They are toast, and they know it.
It was an audacious attack, claiming dozens of lives in the Indian Ocean, international waters, where they may have felt safe.
Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. Quiet death. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
And this is what war looks like now. The US using long-range precision strike missiles in combat for the first time. Wiping out the regime, says the president.
Everybody that seems to want to be a leader, they end up dead.
The commander-in-chief in bullish mood on day 5.
We're doing very well on the war front, to put it mildly, I would say. Somebody said, on a scale of 10, where would you rate it? I said about a 15.
Israel has continued its bombardment of the Iranian capital. Broad-scale strikes, they said, on the regime's command centres in Tehran.
I'm sorry to see we're in such a situation. God willing, this ends soon. To the betterment of Iran and the criminal America is gone.
Mohammed Mehrabi's apartment has been destroyed.
We were at home when this happened. My wife was hit by the blast wave and we took her to the hospital. I was hit by broken glass. A lot of it hit my head.
There have been more strikes on Lebanon too, Israel targeting Hezbollah sites in Beirut, an evacuation order issued for 16 towns and villages. And the joint combat mission, thousands of miles away, continues to have repercussions for President Trump here at home, with members of Congress still seeking clarity on the justification for it and the objectives. But this is a very different administration, so this is a very different war, with the Pentagon now openly boasting that it has abandoned the normal rules of engagement.
This was never meant to be a fair fight, and it is not a fair fight. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be.
But is this how it should be? Sri Lanka recovering the bodies of Iranian sailors, their ship sunk by the United States, a nation that has yet to declare itself at war. David Blevins, Sky News in Washington.
Has to be said, many of the newspapers are leading on this, not least because of the footage that was released by the Americans of this ship sinking. Extraordinary pictures of the torpedo exploding underneath the stern of this vessel, lifting it in the air and therefore breaking the back of this vessel. Was it right, do you think? I mean, they've got The Guardian there, at least 87 dead. Was it right that the scope of this war extends into international waters?
Well, look, I think the US have made it very clear that they are going to pursue the Iranian regime wherever they can find them. So while this is very dramatic footage, and clearly, you know, the first time that the US has taken this kind of step since the Second World War. I don't think anyone should be surprised.
It seems that the ship was coming back from an event off the coast of India, a naval exercise at the invitation of the Indians, returning back to, well, Iran, or as near as it could get. Does that make a difference, do you think, that it had been invited by a third nation to this conflict?
I think it does make a difference, but I think that you would have to understand what US intelligence was telling you about what that ship was carrying. We've had instances in the case of Venezuela where you have those shadow ships that are carrying illegal oil. So I don't think we can, at this point, rule out that it wasn't a legitimate target, but certainly those questions will arise as we go through this process. But again, just to echo what James is saying, there is a determination that's coming from the US around this, and whether that is to get Iran back to the negotiating table with an upper hand, or whether that is about stabilising the situation in the Middle East by showing force. I mean, I think that is a logic that we can appreciate, even if not everybody agrees with it.
Yes, the Financial Times tells us that the US broadens the war on Iran to the high seas, and the threat of wider attacks as this frigate is sunk off Sri Lanka. I mean, it's basically telling the Iranians, we'll get you wherever you are.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it's not just, as we were discussing earlier, the sinking of this ship that has shown the way in which this conflict is spiralling. There have been missiles falling in Syria and in Turkey, and an escalation of the conflict in Lebanon. So clearly, as Starmer said, you know, it doesn't look like this is going to be over anytime soon.
Yes, indeed, and the eye as well. War zone widens, conflict spreads to the Indian Ocean in the first American attack outside the Middle East during this war. Pentagon sharing this footage of the submarine torpedoing an attack, killing 87 sailors still missing. The suggestion is 180 people are aboard, 32 pulled from the water still alive, 87 have been found. And there was a sort of a celebratory moment today, wasn't there, at that Pentagon briefing with Pete Hegseth and General Kent, who's been in charge of it from the Pentagon's point of view. And yet people are dying as we watch this footage.
Yeah, and look, I think there is a question sometimes around tone and the loss of life, but there is clearly, as we've talked about all evening, there is a clear determination and there is a clear wish to show some form of strength in the rhetoric that is also coming out. And perhaps that is to do with, you know, the polling that we talked about earlier, is that people are actually anti this conflict and they don't want to see an escalation. And so linking strength to the purpose that is behind it, stability and safety and security, I think can be seen as a motivation behind some of that rhetoric. Now, we can argue about the tone and whether it's right. And as I said earlier, I think James and I would probably both be reluctant to talk about war in that way. But we are in a different world.
And to be fair, if we go back to the Falklands conflict and the sinking of the Belgrano, you see a very similar tone in this country.
And that was controversial. More than 300 Argentine sailors lost their lives in that. You know, many people looked back at that as a moment of, you know, a confusing part of the war, really, in the Falklands. But, you know, that was the first time since the Second World War globally that a torpedo had taken out a warship, you know, not the sinking of the Denner off Sri Lanka. Well, the attacks continue from Iran and its proxies. Israel coming under attack again from Iranian missiles and drones. Well, Diana Magnier was close to the border with Lebanon, where clearly they've taken on Hezbollah.
So we're now right at the border. We're going to go behind here. You can hear the boom. I'll just keep cover down because the border is literally a couple of kilometres. There's been a lot of fighting here over the last 24, 48 hours. It all started Sunday into Monday. Hezbollah sending just 6 rockets over, and Israel deciding to take the opportunity to really go for it and hit hard. From what we understand from the IDF, Iran and Hezbollah are both coordinating their strikes at the moment. So if you get the siren, that means it's coming from Iran. If it's just a loud blast, that means you have to take cover pretty quickly because it's coming from Hezbollah just across the border over there in Lebanon. That grey concrete line is the technical demarcation line. Beyond that is the blue line, behind which Israel had to withdraw back in the day. And you can see the destroyed villages in southern Lebanon. They've been destroyed for a long time now. But what Israel has now said that people have to do is withdraw north of the Litani River. That is a huge area. That's 10% basically of the whole of Lebanon because of the fight with Hezbollah.
We have time. If this is from Iran, so let's proceed.
I love it. If this is from Iran, let's proceed. That's the instruction.
So
how long do we have? A minute and a half?
Yes, we have 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Okay, but
we haven't had many alerts over the past 48 hours, but certainly up here in the border area, you're getting a lot more. So it's quite nice to have shelters all over the place. Although, I've got to say, it's quite a convivial atmosphere in these shelters. It's also full of IDF soldiers who we can't show you, who are pretty used to this.
Diana Magnay reporting there from northern Israel as Hezbollah and Israel take on each other. Well, the conflict and Iran also wreaking havoc on the global economy, effectively closing the Strait of Hormuz to oil tankers. That is one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Well, Sky's Sally Lockwood is in the UAE and has seen how tankers are queuing up.
There was a big explosion just behind us. It's not clear what's been hit, whether it was an oil facility or a tanker, but certainly a big fire has broken out and it's lit up the evening sky here in bright orange, big flames, a huge cloud of smoke, but no official word yet as to exactly what's happened. But if we're to go by recent days, then it's probably some sort of projectile that has hit either a tanker or an oil facility, because there have been a number of incidents like that. Even just this morning, there was a container ship trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz here, coming in this direction, which was hit by a projectile, probably a drone. A fire broke out. The crew were rescued safely. There was no environmental damage. And there was a similar incident here in Fujairah last night. And to give you an idea why this is so significant, this strait here is a very narrow waterway. It's 21 miles wide at the most narrow point, with Oman and the UAE to the south and Iran to the north. And around a fifth of the world's oil flows through this strait out into the Gulf of Oman and reaches the world's energy supply. And at the moment, it's effectively closed, not officially, but the Revolutionary Guard has said that any ship trying to pass through will be targeted and attacked. And as we're seeing, that is happening. And it's brought commercial shipping to an absolute standstill here, just off the coast where we are. Earlier, we could see dozens of tankers at standstill, along with naval vessels.
Yes, and we've talked all week about the fact that this impacts absolutely everything we do, the oil, the gas as well that's coming from Qatar. I think both the assessment now is that the Americans and Australians can't fill the gap in terms of LNG. 20% is exported from Qatar around the world. You know, is this a real concern, do you think, to our economy and to elsewhere in the world?
It's not just that. The FT are reporting that shipments of gold and silver in and out of Dubai have come to a stop. It's that serious. But no, look, this is going to be... The implications of this conflict are going to be felt in people's pockets in this country. And we've been talking about the remarkable footage of the sinking of the Iranian warship. But what the US have also done is blown a hole in the government's cost of living campaign. So all they've wanted to talk about since the start of the year was the action that they're taking around energy bills. You know, when Rachel Reeves stood up to talk about it yesterday again in the Commons, you know, it was already out of date.
Yes, indeed. So these are the images from the Strait of Hormuz looking towards Iran from the UAE. And you can see in the murk there, you know, these massive vessels all lined up, Qatar having to close its liquefied natural gas production because it can't get tankers out. And, you know, this impacts everybody, including China, which takes its oil from Iran, which would also have to go down the Strait of Hormuz. You know, it's almost like we're watching economic stagnation by looking at these pictures, Salma.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there is a wider question here. I think this is what Kemi Badenoch was trying to get at PMQs, twofold. One is energy security and stability, and what actually have we been doing around that question for quite a long time. In terms of ensuring our supply and making sure that there is enough domestic production. And we'll see that sort of in the arguments that come up around, you know, green energy, but also certainly around the way that we have thought about our defence capabilities. So what this actually does is bring, you know, it's a spotlight on the questions of things that Western liberal politicians have actually failed to address for decades now. So whilst it's an immediate crisis, actually, the reason we're suffering for it sort of seems decades old and not just something that's come up now.
Yes, and the whole point is, of course, it's about maritime insurance, getting through the Strait of Hormuz. We know in London it is the lead for maritime insurance, is it not, under Lloyd's. Certainly yesterday, Donald Trump suggested that he would underwrite insurance and indeed militarily escort, some suggesting that makes tankers even more of a target, to be fair. But Paul Kelso has more on the impact of Lloyd's and what's been happening and the impact of the war on the world economy.
This is Lloyd's of London, the heart of global maritime insurance, as it has been since 1689, when the first brokerage was established in a coffee shop close to this site. This is the original rostrum, where a caller would shout information to brokers, and that is the Lutein Bell. It comes from a ship called the Lutein that sank, carrying a cargo of gold bullion. Lloyd's paid out for the loss and established its reputation. What's worrying brokers here today isn't gold, it's oil and gas, specifically the oil and gas on tankers in the Persian Gulf, currently sat waiting to know what to do either side of the Straits of Hormuz. They've been sitting there since the Iranian military made threats, but there's another factor, not just their security, their insurance status. The Lloyd's market has something called a joint war committee, which assesses what it calls war-related perils for shipping, and they have expanded the area of what they consider to be high risk in the last few days to include Kuwait, Qatar, a wider area of the Gulf. And that simply means the insurance those ships set out with may no longer apply. So they insist they are insured, but they're having to reassess the risk. Reinsurance will come in due course, and then owners can decide whether to move their ships. For now, they are static, and traffic through the Straits of Hormuz has collapsed. What's going up is the cost, not just of shipping, but almost certainly the cost of insuring these vessels. Premiums will rise. There is an offer from Donald Trump made via social media that an American financial institution will offer insurance, but here they don't know what that means.
The detail of such a scheme hasn't been given to anyone so far as we know, and it will take time to work it out. And the appetite is unknown. Essentially, our market is still writing risks, and there isn't a perception here that there's a need for intervention at this time.
Trump has also promised naval vessels to provide an escort for tankers, even if that could mean oil bound for China being taken there by US military vessels. Some think that might reduce the risk. Others point out it could push up the premium because a naval vessel with a US flag could be a target.
There will be those who think it might increase the target because the Iranians are targeting US military. It's not known how capable they would be against the new drone and missile threats that we're seeing. This is not the same as the 80s. So, yes, obviously people would like to see the detail. They'd like to see it happen. If you're a tanker owner, you'd be, on the one hand, delighted that it's been offered. On the other hand, trying to understand whether it does increase the risk or not.
This place once paid out £1 million to the owners of the Titanic within 30 days. Now, mercifully, no vessels have been lost since this war began. We can be pretty certain that prices of oil, of gas, of premiums paid by those shipping them, and ultimately to consumers, they're going up.
Yes, insurers having a big, impact also, but not surprisingly. I mean, the war dividend has gone up massively for any of those ships in the Strait of Hormuz right now. No wonder they're not moving through it.
Yeah, I mean, and the first indication of kind of how the world is moving quite often happens with Lloyd's of London in the city. You've just heard there. Maritime insurers for the world. So I think if we want to know what's happening, sometimes it's just best to go over the bridge over there and have a look at what's happening.
Yes, I was reading about the intelligence they have as well, actually, Lloyd's of London, because it's so critical to their business. But, you can understand why we're seeing this impact. It feels like COVID, doesn't it? It feels like, well, John Craig earlier talked about the Suez crisis in 1956. It feels like when that ship got stuck as well in the Red Sea, different part of the ocean as well.
We all know what happened to our energy bills when the latest Russian invasion of Ukraine occurred. That was huge jumps. I don't think there are some forecasts out today talking about 10% jumps. That isn't as high as what happened back then. But of course, we don't know how long this is going to go on for.
Yes, and can you have growth with high energy bills and inflation moving in the wrong direction? That's the question, isn't it, I suppose? Lots more still to come in the next part of our programme. We'll look at the UK's position. Is Keir Starmer having a Love Actually hero? The Times is saying that allies are rounding on what they're calling a weak UK. Back in a moment.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think is really unusual? Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Well, depending on your perspective, Keir Starmer is either having a Zelensky moment with Donald Trump or he's reenacting that famous scene from Love Actually. I think you have to watch the film to know what we're talking about. This is what he actually said in the House of Commons today.
American planes are operating out of British bases. That is the special relationship in action. British jets are shooting down drones and missiles to protect American lives in the Middle East on our joint bases. That is the special relationship in action. Sharing intelligence every day to keep our people safe. That is the special relationship in action. Hanging on to President Trump's latest words is not the special relationship.
The fact of the matter is that the war in Iran is happening now. But the OBR say the government won't hit 3% on defence for 5 years. The war is happening now. There is no urgency from the Prime Minister. Why is he leaving the job of funding our armed forces to the next government?
Well, our chief political correspondent, John Craig, has joined us again. And I suppose two real criticisms from Kemi Badenoch during that discussion. One, is it too little too late from the UK in terms of protecting its own forces? And two, goodness me, look at our MOD and what we're running here and the hollowing out of our armed forces. But, John, is he steadfast, do you think? Does he feel confident in his timing? Relenting and letting UK bases be used for defensive operations, or is he feeling the stinging criticism from the Americans?
Well, just on that time story, the headline there is Allies round on weak UK, and I think it mentions Cyprus in that story. What happened at the weekend was that over the weekend he had phone calls with the leaders of Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, Cyprus and Oman. And in his statement on Sunday night, he said, our partners in the Gulf have asked us to do more to defend them. And that led to, that in his statement on Sunday night, that was when he said, yes, we are going to allow the bases to be used for defensive purposes. Now, I spoke to Kemi Badenoch yesterday. She was saying that the Prime Minister should have given the go-ahead in the first place, not waited till Sunday night. That has been her criticism. She said, I'm not gung-ho about this, but we should have responded straight away. This is the accusation from the Conservatives. He's been too slow. And his critics will say he's listened too much to his Attorney General, the human rights lawyer, Lord Hermer, who's one of his old legal chums. He's public enemy number one as far as many MPs are concerned, because they claim that he is driving policy. And, of course, he's the Attorney General, not a sort of minister on policy like a foreign secretary or someone like that. He has got too much power, his critics say.
OK, I'm going to come back to the Times in a minute, but while you're on that, let's go to the Daily Telegraph, which says Ed Miliband led cabinet opposition to US military action in Iran and the use of Britain's bases. It also quotes that Rachel Reeves and Yvette Cooper are understood to have strongly opposed UK support for any preemptive military action, suggesting there was a meeting on Friday ahead of the strikes. You begin to wonder if the Americans had given forewarning that this was about to happen, or if they'd made a last-ditch plea for the bases to be used.
Well, there was certainly plenty of phone calls between the President and the Prime Minister, with the President, by all accounts, some say shouting down the phone, saying, come on, let me use these bases. That story on the front of the Telegraph is actually from the Spectator magazine, an article by their political editor, Tim Shipman.
Yes, and are you not surprised that Ed Miliband is singled out here by a newspaper like the Daily Telegraph? He's often in their sights.
He absolutely is for all sorts of reasons. But, I mean, I think there is a good reason why the Telegraph have led on Ed Miliband's opposition, because, as John will very much remember, Ed Miliband led the opposition to airstrikes on Syria after the Syrian regime used chemical weapons, and that led to a defeat in the Commons for the government, which in turn changed Barack Obama's mind on carrying out the airstrikes. Now, Ed Miliband saw this as a huge success and supposedly, I was told, ran into the Labour whip's office shouting, we stopped a war, which, of course, it didn't stop the war. What it stopped was the Syrian regime being punished for using chemical weapons. And for lots of people, including lots of people in the Labour Party, that was seen as emboldening the West's enemies.
And indeed, there was a chemical attack soon afterwards. And of course, the red line that Obama had set down was crossed with no action. So that was
when David Cameron was Prime Minister.
Yes.
And David Cameron was furious with Ed Miliband. It was late August or early September 2013. And Mr Cameron had not really prepared MPs for the vote. He did it straight away when they came back after the summer. What Mr Cameron, of course, when he was berating Ed Miliband, failed to mention was the 30-odd Tory MPs who rebelled, and that's why he lost the vote.
Yes, I'm going to do the newspaper shortly. I promised we'd go back to the Times just very quickly. It's the second paragraph. The Times has been told that Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates have concerns about the UK's response to the Middle East conflict, which has led to that weak UK comment as well.
Yeah, I think this is very troubling because this is about UK assets in the Middle East, in the theatre of conflict, wobbling on our intentions and our support and our relationship. And this isn't just about the US and the White House and their treatment of Keir Starmer. This is something that is now infecting our relationships more broadly, and I think that is a big cause for concern.
Okay. And I would just like to come back on the point you were making here about Lord Hermer, because I think Keir Starmer appointed Richard Hermer precisely so he would give this kind of judgment. And I was talking about this with a lawyer this morning who said, you know, if you're a lawyer, you can make an argument for anything, frankly. But I think Keir Starmer put Richard Hermer in that position, knowing full well that this would be his advice if push came to shove in this kind of situation.
But there's legal advice and there's realpolitik.
Yep.
And that is not the same calculation and that's not the same outcome that we necessarily need.
Yes, and perhaps we'll share it later. There's realpolitik and there's two lawyers getting their heads together, which is Keir Starmer and Lord Hermer, and there's the way the Americans and Pete Hegseth talks about this war, which maybe we'll show in a moment. Let's take a look at the front pages, shall we, of tomorrow's newspapers right now, starting with the Financial Times, which leads on the escalating war with Iran after a US submarine torpedoed an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean in international waters near Sri Lanka. Well, The Guardian reports at least 87 people have died in that attack on that vessel. The Telegraph writes Ed Miliband has strongly opposed the US military action in Iran and the use of Britain's bases. The Metro also leads on the expanding conflict in the Middle East, writing Trump's war goes global. That is Syria, that picture. The widening of the war zone is also the focus for the Eye. On the front of the Express, the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch blasts the Prime Minister's handling of the conflict, branding it weak, weak, weak. The Times writes that Britain's allies in the Gulf and in Cyprus have also accused Sir Keir Starmer of failing to do enough to protect the UK. Meanwhile, the Mirror reports the husband of a Labour Member of Parliament is one of 3 men arrested on suspicion of spying for China. The Star carries the same with the headline, The Spy Who Loved MP. And The Sun claims Greek police wanted £50,000 from England footballer Harry Maguire to resolve his legal issues in the country. I think The Sun has decided they've had enough of war, or their readers have, haven't they? But anyway, I talked earlier about the US Defence Secretary, or the self-styled Secretary of State for War, Pete Hegseth, who bluntly said today in a briefing, Iran is toast.
Our warfighters have maximum authorities granted personally by the President and yours truly. Our rules of engagement are bold, precise, and designed to unleash American power, not shackle it. This was never meant to be a fair fight, and it is not a fair fight. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be.
Well, that is nothing, would you believe it, compared to a video released by the White House. Have a look at this.
The hardest hits are yet to come from the U.S. military. The next phase will be even more punishing on Iran than it is right now. We have objectives.
We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world. We will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon.
We will do this as long as it takes to achieve those objectives, and we will achieve those objectives. The world will be a safer place when we're done with this operation.
Salma, did you enjoy that one?
Do you know, I have to say, whatever you think about the content, the American administration does socials better than anyone else. We're it's almost embarrassed about putting things out on social media. And I think if you want to put a strong statement out and you want to have some cut through, at least they know what they're doing on that score.
But it is a war, you know, with more than 1,000 already dead, potentially many thousands dying. You know, there's something, you know, that the British would struggle with about, you know, heavy metal music and
but they're backing
war propaganda.
They're backing
with knobs on.
But they're backing their position, and they are putting out. I can absolutely see the logic of why this is, and you're right. I think we would find that difficult because we want to balance everything. But they don't have any compunction with that. They have a message, and they're going to sell it.
My producer's just reminding me of the gotcha headline in The Sun. Was that the Belgrano that we talked about earlier in the Falklands War? But you know, anyway, James, what did you think?
I mean, I agree with Starmer. That's an amazing piece of communication. And you know, if the target audience is the MAGA supporters who aren't convinced by foreign adventures, I think they're probably in the right place.
Probably G's up the troops as well, and they're in a dangerous position. MPs here were doing something completely different, were they not? And I know you're not really happy about this. Is Angela Rippon, a bit of Strictly Come Dancing, you know, in Portcullis House, which is over the road from Parliament, for well-being and mental health.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I've said this earlier, but I think this is a really undignified spectacle, and I have a lot of time for the Speaker. I know him a little bit. I think he's a great guy, and he's a good Speaker. But I think this is an ill-judged event, and not least, I mean, James, you said it earlier. I mean, for me, it's sort of what's going on in the world at the moment and what sort of message this sends to the constituents who are watching this.
Well, I think, given the pressures that most people feel in their daily lives today, the last thing they want to see is some sort of taxpayer-funded tango.
It's the Speaker with Angela Rippon, you can see at the front of the picture there, that's on the front of the Telegraph.
Yeah.
And on the right of the picture is an MP who I've met for the first time last week, the new MP for Gorton and Denton, Hannah Spencer. She's obviously, I mean, I saw her in Parliament yesterday, and she was, well, I wouldn't say she was wandering around looking a little lost, but she was certainly bemused. She must have arrived in Parliament and thought, my goodness, what a place this is. And then this morning she sees that going on, so much so she took a photo of it.
I think she's probably enjoying it herself, isn't she, John? But there we are. John, I think you're going to stay with us because after the break we're going to be talking about, we're hearing from the Home Secretary tomorrow, which is a clampdown on migration, and also looking at the arrest of 3 men, including the husband of a Labour MP, on suspicion of spying for China. Back in a moment.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'll take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Being a Sky News journalist. Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
So time now for a closer look at what is making more of the newspapers. Let us go straight to what we're expecting to hear tomorrow from the Home Secretary on immigration. It makes the inside pages of The Eye. Mahmoud to reveal tough new laws on asylum hotel evictions. John, this is what you're here for, because I know we've got a big special programme with her tomorrow evening as well, interviewed by Trevor Phillips.
Big interview with Trevor, yes. That's at 7 o'clock, I believe, at time of the Politics Hub, special Politics Hub programme. Shabana Mahmood went to Denmark last week, took some journalists with her, and was very impressed by the way they tackle this problem. And now she's introducing similar proposals here. Big speech tomorrow morning. Now, the proposals include people granted asylum in the UK will have their refugee status reviewed every 30 months. At the moment, it's 5 years. And asylum seekers who break the law or work illegally are to be thrown out of government-funded accommodation, whether it's hotels or military barracks or whatever, and lose their support payments. Now, the government is saying that they've already recouped, well, saved £400 million in asylum accommodation and support costs after what they say was a crackdown on tourists abusing the immigration system. Now, besides the measures, it's going to be a very political speech because she's going to attack both Reform and the Greens. And, for example, she's going to say that Nigel Farage's proposals are a nightmare, pulling up the drawbridge and shutting out the world, and the Green Party leader Zach Solansky's fairy tale of open borders. And she's going to say, restoring order and control at our border is not a betrayal of Labour values, it's an embodiment of them, and it's the necessary condition for a Labour government to achieve anything it hopes to. So a big moment tomorrow, and she'll obviously be hoping for a good reception for it. No doubt she'll get criticised by the left of the Labour Party, perhaps the Lib Dems and others.
I mean, there's practicalities too. If you pull people out of accommodation, be it hotel or barracks, you know, where do they go? Is this a sort of future homelessness crisis?
Well, that is some of the reaction already to that, actually. I think it's from Zia Youssef from Reform UK, their Home Affairs spokesman. He says better to deport them than have them out on the streets. And I think others are saying that as well. That is one problem.
Yes. We understand, by the way, that Beirut is under attack once again. I didn't read earlier if there was an evacuation order by the Israelis, but take a look at these pictures. Yeah, that's the live picture. As you can see, similar to last night at the same time, it looks like, and I'm presuming this is the southern suburbs of Beirut as before. We know earlier Israel had suggested it had targeted a Hezbollah leader in one of the earlier strikes earlier today. But this is clearly an ongoing battle. Certainly the Israelis' view is that the coalition of evil, as they call it, which is Iran and its proxies, are converging here. And clearly, their belief is that Iran has triggered its proxies, both those in Iraq and here in Lebanon, to strike Israel. So this is what we're witnessing, Israel hitting back. Just going back to Shabana Mahmood as well, can she bring her Labour MPs with her? Are they less tough, do you think, on immigration than she is, especially as we're seeing falling rates of migration in this country?
I think the issue is that you have lots of people who are going to have a different level of nervousness now that they've seen the results of the Gorton and Denton by-election. And I think the whole Labour strategy around targeting Reform and perhaps to a certain extent aping them on the toughness around migration feels like it could be a misstep. But I think Shabana Mahmood, actually, as a former special advisor in the Home Office, is acquitting herself incredibly well, notwithstanding that there are going to be issues, practical issues around the policy. There may be legal issues around the policy. She actually is getting this under control. The bigger issue down the line is going to be the drop-off in migration rates and what that potentially means for growth as well, if you cannot control the types of people you want to come in. So it's not about illegal migration, but it is about filling those skills gaps and also thinking about innovation.
Well, James has just, hold on, just quickly, John. James has just revealed that he left Morgan McSweeney's leaving due to come here. First of all, was it good?
It was certainly very busy.
OK, my second question is, Morgan McSweeney famously was the person who wanted to take Labour more to the centre ground post the Corbyn era, was trying to wrench Labour off Corbynism, effectively.
And did.
And did, as we saw. So is this idea of do you focus on reform and try to out-reform reform, does that still stand? Or will Keir Starmer have to swing left?
So lots of people in the Labour Party who are going around saying you can't out-reform reform also want to seem to out-green the Greens. But actually, I think on immigration, the whole some people in the Labour Party are in danger of learning the wrong lessons from the by-election, because polling shows that actually people who vote Green want to see immigration controlled as well. It's stopped being a party political issue. And so I think this will be widely welcomed, and I would absolutely echo what Starmer had to say. I think Shabana Mahmood has proven to be an absolutely first-rate Home Secretary.
Do you think people in the Labour Party, you know, watch people who vote Green and think they don't really know what they're voting for?
I don't know. I think they feel so. I think they think they're very worried, and there's obviously been a lot of discussion around the tone of the by-election campaign. But look, you know, Tony Blair once said that outside of a general election, you're in a constant referendum against the government of people's dreams, right? And it's only when you actually come to make that decision in a general election that people will actually focus on what really counts. And I think what we're seeing is the Greens being a repository for a lot of unhappiness right now.
And just very quickly on Morgan McSweeney's do, did he make a speech? How does
I missed the speeches. I was late.
Really? Oh, you were late, so it's not that you had to come here. OK, but are people genuinely sad?
It was still in full swing when I left.
Really? OK, we're very appreciative. Are people genuinely sad that he had to leave, do you think?
Yeah, lots of people are. Morgan McSweeney, working with Keir Starmer, brought the Labour Party back from the dead and made it electable. And didn't just, I mean, they achieved in one parliament what it took Neil Kinnock and Tony Blair 3 terms to do.
Yeah, and many people thought that was not possible. Back on Shabana Mahmood, very quickly, leadership pitch from her, do you think, this push?
Possibly, yes. I mean, a lot of people say she's not quite ready for it yet. I mean, she's not been in Parliament that long. She was regarded as a success at the Justice Department, and that's why she got the job at the Home Office, because that clearly the government thought was a priority, tackling stopping the boats and also tackling the migration problem. She's won plaudits from her toughness. Tough Home Secretary like Blunkett, John Reid, dare one say Michael Howard on the Tory side. And I think the public would like to see a tough Home Secretary, not just on immigration, but on crime as well.
Yeah, OK.
But her seat might go, so under the current polling, so there might be... she might be taking out the contest herself.
Under the current polling, she won't be alone.
Not the only
exactly.
one.
Where's Streeting looking tight as well, isn't he? Let's be honest with you. But anyway...
Birmingham.
Really? There's probably a list, isn't there? Let's just return you to those pictures, the live pictures from Beirut. Yet another attack, it looks like, from the Israelis. The Lebanese Health Ministry suggesting tonight that there have been 3 dead and 6 wounded in that latest attack. The smoke has somewhat dissipated in the night sky over Beirut. Keeping an eye on that, of course, and elsewhere in the Middle East. Back in a moment.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics. I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Well, a bit about us now, because Sky News has had a fantastic night at the Royal Television Society Journalism Awards this evening, including winning News Channel of the Year. The jury, rather praising... Can't even speak reading this. I might as well have been at the do. Anyway, praising our consistent ability to be in the right place at the right time, delivering strong, well-balanced and memorable coverage of the year's big stories.
The cameras are poised here, there, everywhere.
The day those present would never forget.
First question, Sky News.
Do you hate the thought of losing to him?
I hate the thought of losing to anyone.
Historic day here today.
They are pushing forward.
They dash to the water.
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Why don't you go back to your country?
Huge questions to be grappled with.
That is totally unprecedented.
Been quite some day.
Let me start with breaking news.
Always reminds you what a busy year it was that you were doing. Yalda Hakim, presenter of the year, of the World programme rather, won the Network Presenter of the Year. The jury said she is calm, insightful and with a dazzling stage presence who has had an exceptional year. Meantime, Yusra El-Bakhir, our Africa correspondent, has won the Network Television Journalist of the Year, in particular for her reporting on the civil war in Sudan. The jury said she is someone who has dedicated themselves to reporting on a conflict which hasn't had enough headlines. Well, our Home News correspondent, Molly Malone, took the award for Emerging Talent of the Year. The jury said in just a few years, Molly has made the crime and prisons beat her own. Well, massive congratulations to all of them. Sadly, Yalda Hakim missed the do. Out in Jerusalem, reporting, of course, on the Iran war. But very many congratulations to all those winners. Thank you so much for coming in and for missing Morgan McSweeney's leaving do, James.
Thank you.
I know, it's very, very good of you. And Salma, thanks again to you as well. Let's take a look at the weather now.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, cloud and rain spreading in from the Atlantic will bring cooler, clearer conditions by the end of the weekend. For now, the southerly flow is bringing very mild air from the south, with temperatures likely to reach a high of 17 or 18 degrees Celsius in the sunnier spots. Scotland and Ireland will have a cloudy start to the day with outbreaks of rain that will be heavy at times. Elsewhere, any early low cloud and hill fog will thin and break to bright or sunny spells. It will become warm, with temperatures reaching the mid-teens Celsius away from the cloudy northwest. Central and southern and eastern counties will hang on to the sunshine for most of the day. Western parts of the UK will see increasing amounts of cloud.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News weather.
Well, that was the world. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, both of you, for bringing us all your thoughts. We'll be back soon. The Midnight News is next.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist? I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up. Big Sky News journalist. Ed Conway. Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is. First off, just the scale of what we're looking at. Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter? We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to. Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you. So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.